entitled neighbor mistreats my dog because he thinks it's fun, but it's not so fun for him when I present all this disturbing evidence to the police about what he does with the neighbors. Hello, everyone. I need a bit of legal advice about a very frustrating situation with my neighbor. I live in a quiet residential area on the outskirts of a medium-sized city in the western United States. I've been here for almost 2 years, and overall, it's been a good place to live. However, about a year ago, a new neighbor moved into the house next door, and since then, things have gone downhill. To give you some context, this neighbor has been a nightmare from the day he arrived. He's the typical entitled and narcissistic neighbor who believes the rules don't apply to him. At first, I try to be nice and give him the benefit of the doubt, but it quickly became clear he had no interest in being a good neighbor. For example, he has thrown loud parties late into the night, even on weekdays. When I kindly asked him to lower the volume, he told me to relax and that life is meant to be enjoyed. He has cut branches from other neighbors' trees without permission, claiming they blocked his view. However, they weren't on his property, which has led to arguments in the street with the neighbors. But the incident that led me to seek legal advice happened about 4 months ago when my neighbor got a drone. At first, I thought it was just a new toy and that he'd get bored of it soon, but I was wrong. He started flying the drone all over the neighborhood, not respecting anyone's privacy. He flew it near the windows of houses, followed people walking down the street, and even raced it against passing cars. Several neighbors complained, but he just laughed and said he was exploring his new hobby. The worst part is what he started doing with my dog. I have a 50-kilogram Alaskan Malamute. He's a big dog, but with an even bigger heart. I've had him for 5 years, since I graduated from college. He's been my constant companion through several moves and changes in my life. I don't have a partner or kids, so he is my family. My problem began when my neighbor decided to fly the drone in my backyard, specifically over my dog's head. He would fly it low, almost grazing his head, then circle back and do it again. My dog, despite his size, is terrified of the drone. The noise and sudden movement scare him terribly. Every time he was calm, sleeping, or playing in the yard, the drone would appear and terrify him. I've told my neighbors several times to stop flying it over my backyard. I explained that it's private property and that he was scaring my dog for no reason. His response is always the same. He laughs in my face and tells me to get lost. I've tried reasoning with him, explaining that what he's doing isn't just annoying but potentially dangerous for my dog, but it's like talking to a wall. I even called the police a couple of times. They came and spoke with him, but they told me there wasn't much they could do beyond asking him to stop. Apparently, the drone laws in our area are quite vague and hard to enforce. This situation went on for weeks. My dog was becoming more and more stressed and anxious. He no longer wanted to go out to the yard to play, and when he did, he was constantly on edge, waiting for the drone to appear. Watching him like this broke my heart. I tried keeping him inside more, but that wasn't fair to him either because he loves being outdoors. One day, about a week ago, I came home from work to find chaos in my backyard. There were pieces of plastic and wires scattered everywhere. My dog was sitting in the middle of it, playing with something in his mouth. It took me a moment to realize what had happened. Apparently, my dog had finally mustered the courage and caught the drone when it flew too low. And once he had it in his mouth, he completely destroyed it. I barely had time to process what had happened when I heard furious banging on my front door. It was my neighbor, red with anger, yelling that my beast, as he called him, had destroyed his drone. He demanded that I pay for the damages immediately. I tried to stay calm and explained that this wouldn't have happened if he had respected my repeated requests to keep the drone out of my property. I reminded him of all the times I had asked him to stop harassing my dog, but he didn't want to listen to reason. I also told him it was time to relax and enjoy life, as he had once told me, but it seems his own advice didn't help him, as he continued yelling and threatening to sue me. Eventually, I got him to leave, but not before he warned me that I would regret this. Honestly, at that moment, I felt more relieved than worried. Finally, I thought, my dog would have some peace. However, my relief was short-lived. A couple of days ago, I received a court summons. My neighbor is suing me for $1,500 in damages, $1,000 for the destroyed drone, and an additional $500 for denying him access to my property to retrieve it. I'm furious for several reasons. First, I looked up the model of drone my neighbor had, and it costs about $650 new. He's clearly inflating the cost to buy a better one, or simply to profit from this. Second, I never denied him access to my property. When the incident occurred, I was at work. He could have easily jumped the fence to retrieve the remains of the drone if he really wanted to. The fence isn't particularly high. However, I suspect he's afraid of my dog, and that's why he didn't enter. And rightfully so, after everything he's done to him, including harassing him with the hose when watering his garden. Third, All of this could have been avoided if he had simply respected my requests and the privacy of my property. Now, let me be clear. I have no intention of paying a single cent. I feel my dog acted in self-defense and in defense of our property. My neighbor's behavior was not only annoying but potentially dangerous. The drone could have physically injured my dog if it had hit him, and the constant stress could have had serious consequences for his health. What if he had suffered a heart attack from the fear? Or if, in his panic, he had escaped the yard and been hit by a car? My dog has been my best friend for the past 5 years. He's been with me through good and bad times. He's accompanied me through every move, every job change, and every breakup. He's always been there, loyal and loving. The idea that someone would deliberately torment him just for fun infuriates me. I understand that not everyone feels the same way about animals, but that doesn't justify cruel behavior toward them. A dog is not a toy to be tormented at someone's whim. So here I am, seeking legal advice. Does my neighbor actually have a case against me? Or are his threats baseless and without legal grounds? I don't want to pay for a drone that was destroyed as a direct result of his own irresponsible actions. I'm also wondering if I have any legal recourse against him for the continued harassment of my dog and invasion of my privacy. Because even if I win against his lawsuit, I doubt it will take long for him to get another drone. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. I'm willing to fight this in court if necessary, but I want to make sure I'm on solid legal ground before proceeding. Thank you for taking the time to read all of this. It's been a stressful and frustrating situation, and I really appreciate any guidance you can offer. Update 1. I wanted to share an update on the situation I described a while back with my neighbor and his drone. Since posting my story, I've received an incredible amount of support and helpful advice, for which I'm deeply grateful. As I mentioned before, my neighbor decided to sue me after my dog destroyed his drone, and the situation escalated to small claims court. Here's how the events unfolded and the final outcome. After receiving the court summons, I decided to seek legal advice to make sure I was on the right track. I spoke to several local lawyers, and to my surprise, they all agreed that my neighbor's lawsuit was actually the best thing that could have happened. According to them, by suing me, my neighbor gave me the perfect platform to expose his own mistakes and faults, and it also gave me the chance to present strong evidence against him. One of the lawyers told me, sometimes the best defense is letting the other side talk. And boy, was he right. I gathered all the evidence I had, from videos of the drone harassing my dog to records of police calls, and most importantly, the vet bills that showed the physical and emotional toll this situation had on my dog. The day of the trial came, and both of us appeared in small claims court. My neighbor walked in with an arrogant attitude, as if he was certain he would win the case easily. In his lawsuit, he claimed that I had trained my dog to destroy his drone. This argument was so absurd that even the judge had to stifle a laugh when he heard it. The neighbor alleged that I had specifically trained my dog to attack drones, which, even if true, and of course it wasn't, would have no legal standing. The fact that he was deliberately flying his drone over my property and harassing my dog already invalidated any claim he might have had. When it was time to present my defense, I brought out the big guns. I showed photos and videos I had taken of multiple instances where my neighbor flew his drone low and near my dog, not by accident, but deliberately. In the videos, it was clear how he would fly the drone close to my dog's head, causing obvious fear and stress in him. But what really sealed the case were the vet bills. After the drone was destroyed, my dog had to undergo several medical procedures. Although not all of them were directly because of the drone, they were necessary due to the stress the situation had caused him. Here are some examples of the bills. X-rays, $600. I had to get my dog X-rayed to make sure he hadn't swallowed any pieces of the drone, which could have been dangerous for his health. Dental cleaning, $400. After destroying the drone, my dog suffered minor damage to his teeth. The dental cleaning was necessary to prevent infections. Plus, it was about time for a good cleaning anyway. Sedatives for procedures, $250. Due to the stress and anxiety caused by the drone, my dog needed sedatives to undergo these procedures without panicking. Anti-anxiety medication, $500. My dog developed significant anxiety after the constant drone intrusions in our yard. The vet prescribed anti-anxiety meds to help him relax. Wet food, $150. For a week, my dog could only eat wet food because his teeth hurt too much after destroying the drone and from the procedures. Other medical expenses, $1,100. This includes additional checkups, follow-up consultations, and medications to help my dog cope with the stress. In total, the medical bills amounted to $3,000. Of course, not all of it was strictly necessary, but if he wanted to make absurd accusations, I was done with being nice. I presented all this evidence to the judge, who surprisingly accepted it. I think the judge saw it as a form of punishment for my neighbor. The judge didn't take long to reach a conclusion. Not only did he dismiss my neighbor's lawsuit, but he also made it clear that my neighbor had no legal basis for his claim. Additionally, the judge ordered my neighbor to compensate me for my dog's medical expenses, since all of this was a direct consequence of his irresponsible behavior. To make matters worse for my neighbor, I found out that the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, had started investigating his drone behavior. It turns out he had violated several important regulations. One of them, flying near an airport. Our area is relatively close to a small airport, and my neighbor was flying his drone without regard for the restrictions. Another violation, flying near people. As I mentioned earlier, he would fly his drone near people's windows and follow them as they walk down the street, which is a clear violation of safety regulations. He also violated flying out of his line of sight. My neighbor often flew the drone in areas where he couldn't see it directly, which is another infraction. The FAA doesn't take these violations lightly, and now my neighbor is facing serious fines and possibly other legal actions for his reckless use of the drone. Although these past months have been quite annoying for both me and my dog, at least I came out on top. Not only did I manage to protect my dog's rights and ensure he got the treatment he needed, but I also put a stop to my neighbor's abusive behavior. My dog has returned to his usual self, enjoying his time outdoors without the constant threat of the drone. And thanks to the compensation I'll be receiving, I'll be able to cover all the medical expenses this situation caused. Thank you all for your support. Update 2. I'm back with a new update for you all. After the last development, it seemed like we had finally reached a sort of peace, and my dog was able to enjoy the yard again without the constant threat of a drone hovering overhead. Regarding the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, situation, I haven't received any concrete news so far. I sincerely hope he faced some sort of sanction. It would be fair given everything we've been through. Unfortunately, the peace didn't last long. After a few months of relative calm, my neighbor started acting up again, although in a more subtle manner at first. It began with small things like throwing trash into my backyard. I found plastic bottles, empty beer cans, and even food scraps that clearly weren't mine. I considered suing him, but my lawyer advised that unless the amount was substantial and required a lot of work, it wasn't worth the time and expense of a lawsuit. However, things quickly escalated when, one morning, while reviewing my security cameras, I noticed something that left me stunned. My neighbor had bought a new drone. This time, he was more cautious. He flew his drone when he knew I wasn't home, presumably to avoid being recorded or caught in the act. Apparently, he had learned his lesson from last time, as he kept it at a reasonable height, out of my dog's reach. However, the mere fact that he was flying his drone over my property again was enough to infuriate me. Fortunately, following some advice I received here on Reddit, I had installed security cameras around my house, including the backyard. It was an extra expense that hurt at the time, but looking back now, it was one of the best decisions I made. Thanks to the cameras, I had clear evidence that my neighbor was once again harassing my dog and invading my privacy, only this time he was doing it more discreetly. After reviewing the footage and confirming that it was indeed my neighbor flying the drone, I decided it was time to take more direct action. I wasn't going to wait for the situation to spiral out of control like last time. So, I came up with a plan. First, I took a day off from work, making sure my neighbor wouldn't know I was home. Then, I prepared a sign with somewhat small letters, ensuring it could only be read from a low height. I placed the sign on the ground in my backyard, right where I knew it would catch the attention of anyone operating a drone. For those wondering, the sign said, "Beware of this backyard, as it is a drone graveyard." The interesting part was that each letter got progressively smaller, making it harder to read. As expected, my neighbor couldn't resist the temptation. Knowing he was spying from his house, I kept my dog inside to ensure he wouldn't get hurt and waited patiently for him to take the bait. About 45 minutes later, I heard the familiar buzz of the drone. Through the camera, I saw it descend slowly as it tried to read the sign I had placed in the yard. When the drone was low enough, I grabbed a baseball bat I had hidden nearby and with a single swing, I smashed it. Then, I gave it a few more hits on the ground to finish the job. The drone shattered into 1,000 pieces, falling to the ground like a disassembled puzzle. I gathered the remains of the drone and put them in a cardboard box, along with a note that read, "You can sue me for destroying your drone, but you know what could happen if we go to court again." I have cameras now. I then threw the box into my neighbor's backyard, leaving it where he couldn't possibly miss it. It's been several weeks since then, and so far, I haven't received any summons or heard from my neighbor. It seems he has finally understood that his behavior will not be tolerated and that he can't get away with it. He hasn't bought another drone, or at least hasn't flown one over my house. He also hasn't tried to confront me or continue throwing trash in my yard. Peace has returned to my home, and my dog is once again free from the presence of that device which, to him, is like an alien spacecraft. Of course, I'm prepared for any eventuality. My security cameras are still active, and I'm more than willing to take this case to court again if necessary. At this point, I've become an expert in dealing with his behavior, and I'm ready to defend my property and my dog's safety. Update 3. I'm back with another update on the situation with my neighbor and his damn drone. Before I continue, I want to thank one of the users in the comments who suggested something I honestly hadn't considered initially. This user mentioned that instead of just destroying the drone, I should have removed the memory card, as it might have stored all the flight recordings, which could be valuable evidence. And they were absolutely right. I don't know why it didn't occur to me at the time, but after reading that comment, something clicked in my mind. Luckily, after destroying the drone, I thought to check for the memory card, and it was still intact. I didn't return it to my neighbor along with the drone's remains because I thought he might try to use it as evidence against me, although I admit that leaving a note made little difference. However, at the time, it seemed safer to keep the card. So, thanks to that comment, I decided to check out the recordings on the drone's memory card out of curiosity. What I found was much more disturbing than I expected, and I'm here to ask for your advice on how to handle this situation. When I started reviewing the footage, the first thing I saw were familiar images of my backyard, my dog, and some of the flights I had witnessed before. There was nothing surprising in those videos, except that they confirmed what I already knew. My neighbor was still flying the drone over my property when he thought I wasn't home. However, as I continued exploring the video files, I began to notice something more unsettling. There were numerous recordings from other locations, not just my backyard but also from other properties in the neighborhood. In several of these recordings, the drone approached the windows of other houses, often at times that were clearly inappropriate. What alarmed me the most was that in some of these videos, the drone was spying on people inside their homes. And worse, in some of those recordings, women appeared in private situations, such as in their bathrooms or dressing rooms. These images made me realize that my neighbor wasn't just being annoying with me. He could be engaging in something much more serious. Now I find myself in a complicated situation. I'm absolutely outraged by what I've discovered, and I know I should report it to the authorities immediately. However, I have serious concerns about how to handle this. It's not possible to make an anonymous report in this case, as the police would need to know how I obtained the recordings to act. And that's where things get complicated. I don't want the police to find out that I was the one who destroyed the drone, as there would be no way to explain to them that I have that memory card, which could lead to legal issues for me. Although I have plenty of evidence that my neighbor has been harassing me with his drone, and I could argue that I destroyed it in self-defense or to protect my property, I'm not sure how the authorities would react. It's a risk I'm worried about taking. So, I'm asking for your advice again. What would you do in this situation? Update 4. After much reflection and reading all the advice I received in my last post, I finally made an important decision. Despite my initial fears, I decided to report the situation to the police. Many of you commented that the worst that could happen is that I might have to pay for the drone, and while that was something I was concerned about, it seemed a fair price to pay if it meant exposing my neighbor's disturbing activities. I thought about what I found on the drone's memory card and knew that it was the right thing to do. Not only for me but for the other people in the neighborhood who might also have been victims without knowing it. So, gathering my courage, I went to the police station and filed the report. It wasn't an easy decision, and I was quite nervous as I explained the situation to the officers. I told them everything, from the problems I've had with my neighbor for months, to the moment I decided to destroy his drone and retrieve the memory card. I was completely honest about what I did, including the fact that I broke the drone with a baseball bat after bringing it down to the yard. To my relief, the officers took my report very seriously. They understood the gravity of the images found on the memory card, and although they asked about the circumstances under which I obtained the card, they also seemed to understand why I acted the way I did. One of the officers even told me that, given what was on those videos, I had to have acted. According to them, what my neighbor was doing was a serious invasion of privacy, and that was a much higher priority than the fact that I destroyed his drone. Fortunately, I had evidence to back up my story. I showed them the recordings from my security cameras that captured my neighbor flying the drone near my property and how I brought it down with the bat. Those images confirmed that the drone was not mine and also helped to prove that my neighbor was the operator. I also showed them some of the recordings on the drone's memory card, clearly showing that my neighbor had been spying on other people in the neighborhood, especially women in their private moments. The officers were visibly concerned by what they saw, and one of them assured me that they would take action. They said they would open a formal investigation, and that it was likely this would lead to serious charges against my neighbor. They explained that invading privacy with devices like drones is a serious crime, especially when it involves spying on people in their homes without their consent. Still, I couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy as I left the station. While I felt I had done the right thing, I couldn't stop worrying about the possible consequences. What if my neighbor tried to sue me for destroying the drone? And what if the police decided that I had also acted wrong by taking the memory card and not reporting it immediately? However, the officers assured me that the evidence I provided was strong enough to justify my actions. They told me that, given the context, it was very unlikely that I would face serious charges, and that, at worst, I might have to compensate my neighbor for the cost of the drone. Now, I am waiting for the police to take action against my neighbor. The truth is, I'm exhausted from dealing with him. It has been a constant headache for far too long, and it's unbelievable that there haven't been real consequences for his behavior until now. I've filed several complaints and reports in the past, but so far, nothing had changed. However, this time is different. The evidence I have is far more serious than the minor annoyances he caused before. Update 5. Here's a new update on the situation with my former neighbor and his drone. Several months have passed since I filed the report, and I finally have news to share. After a long wait and much stress, the legal process has come to an end. My neighbor was found guilty of voyeurism-related crimes, connected to the recordings I found on the drone's memory card. The evidence was overwhelming, leading to serious charges against him. The court passed sentence, and in addition to being found guilty, my neighbor was ordered to pay a significant fine. Fortunately, additional measures were taken to ensure he would not have the opportunity to repeat his invasive actions. While I don't have all the details about the exact sanctions, I know this sentence included restrictions related to the use of drones and other similar technologies. The most important thing for me, and for everyone living near him, is that he has finally moved out of the neighborhood. Honestly, I'm more than happy that he's no longer my neighbor. My dog is especially thrilled about it. I also took the initiative to warn other neighbors about what happened. I explained the situation and advised them to take precautions, such as covering their windows and being alert to any suspicious activity. Although I haven't seen or heard of him attempting anything similar since the last incident with the drone, I believe it's better to be safe than sorry. This should be my final update about my neighbor, unless the new neighbor moving into his old house also happens to have a drone. Update 5. Here's a new update on the situation with my former neighbor and his drone. Several months have passed since I filed the report, and I finally have news to share. After a long wait and much stress, the legal process has come to an end. My neighbor was found guilty of voyeurism-related crimes, connected to the recordings I found on the drone's memory card. The evidence was overwhelming, leading to serious charges against him. The court passed sentence, and in addition to being found guilty, my neighbor was ordered to pay a significant fine. Fortunately, additional measures were taken to ensure he would not have the opportunity to repeat his invasive actions. While I don't have all the details about the exact sanctions, I know this sentence included restrictions related to the use of drones and other similar technologies. The most important thing for me, and for everyone living near him, is that he has finally moved out of the neighborhood. Honestly, I'm more than happy that he's no longer my neighbor. My dog is especially thrilled about it. I also took the initiative to warn other neighbors about what happened. I explained the situation and advised them to take precautions, such as covering their windows and being alert to any suspicious activity. Although I haven't seen or heard of him attempting anything similar since the last incident with the drone, I believe it's better to be safe than sorry. This should be my final update about my neighbor, unless the new neighbor moving into his old house also happens to have a drone.